When we think about enlightenment, we often have this connotation that it has to do with years, if not decades, if not lifetimes of meditation. And I listened to a woman on a podcast right now who was channeling, and she was talking about what enlightenment is a state of being, which is the state of unconditional love. And it just was like, yep, I felt it in my entire being. And it may not be true for everyone, but there was such a resonance in it for me. And what I have come to find and believe, and how I like to kind of share things, is to simplify what has been overcomplicated. So it's not to say that certain Buddhist practices of meditation and all of that can bring you to a quote unquote state of enlightenment. But the word always bothered me, because what is enlightenment? Like, if you think about the moments where you felt like, oh, wow, this feels like a moment of enlightenment, of euphoria, of like incredibly intense, accurate, succinct presence. Absolute presence that is imbued with the most intense, beautiful, joyful, moves you to tears state of awareness. And, you can feel that kind of unconditional love for a child or for a pet or for a partner, or watching the sunset, or having some kind of spontaneous moment where all of a sudden you feel this elation, this joy, this bliss, this euphoria, this moment of light. Enlightenment is being in the light. And we are that. We are light, and we are unconditional love. And so I want to spend this episode talking about kind of the demystification of everything that kind of can get so complicated as something that is so theoretical or cerebral, when actually what we're learning right now, as we're deconstructing old belief systems and perspectives and really expanding into a much further multidimensional field of existence, which is really just remembering who we really actually truly are, but keeping it very simple, recognizing that what we're moving towards is a state of being. It's not even a thought, it's a state of being. So if you would like to seek enlightenment, it's about seeking a state of being. And there is no faster way to that quote unquote enlightenment than embodying unconditional love. And so this should be our practice every day, right? So I want to talk about, what does that look like? What does it mean? How do we incorporate that into our lives? How do we go from having ideas and dogmas and constructs to really simplifying it all and coming into a state of being? So let's dive in. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. So I believe there's no one right way to get to where we're trying to get to. I think there is thankfully, so many different paths, so many different insights, tools, methods, all of these things. And I think we have to really intuit what feels right for us. And I think that can change according to and depending on the phase of life that we're in. In my 20s, I had a very strong Buddhist practice. And then I got to a point where I kind of hit a wall with it. And I felt, there's something missing in this for me. It felt very masculine. And I was much more interested in going into kind of the feminine aspects of being human, of exploring the wisdom of emotions, of there was just certain angles that I felt like it was limited within the kind of a very masculine construct. And so then that kind of phase of my life, petered out, and I moved into different phases. And I think, as one gets older, you recognize that you just have built this really cool toolbox, of various techniques and methods and whatever you want to call them. I think they're all amazing tools. And really what they should all bring us to is home within ourselves, and a better understanding of who we are, who we uniquely are. And I think this phase that we're going into right now is really, I've been doing this, what I call the authentic self. If I were to give it a label, I'm not a fan of labels, but if I were to give it a label, I've been talking about the authentic self for the last 15 years. And it's something that, like, I have it everything in my chart, in my gene keys, in everything. It's like authenticity. I'm like, yeah, I can see that that's really my path. But I really feel like we're coming into a time where that is becoming so valuable. It's so valuable, so valued, so important, because I don't know if I said this a few weeks ago or not, when I was listening to someone talk about all of these kind of scientific not experiments, but measurements of emotions and the frequency and the vibration, like the strength of the vibration. And everyone thinks that love is the most powerful emotion, right? And vibration. And I myself would be like, yeah, it's love. And actually what came through was its authenticity. 4,000 times more than love and the heart was authenticity. And I thought, wow, that's powerful. That's really powerful, because what is authenticity? For me, authenticity is getting to be the unique essence of who you are, as you are, and that is worthy, beautiful, perfect, just as it is. And it's not meant to be like anybody else, right? And when you think about this, as let's zoom out and look at it, that everything that is alive, whether human or animal or plant or God knows what, a particle, it's all an expression of consciousness. It's all an embodiment of consciousness, but through a different angle. And that's what makes it so interesting for consciousness. It's like, oh, I get to see myself through the eyes of Corinne. Oh, I get to see myself through the eyes of this plant that's next to me. It's all, and I had this in a plant medicine journey where it was like I got to be all of these different things. And it's like, oh, this is consciousness in this form. This is consciousness in that form. And it's interesting, right? That consciousness gets to experience itself through the eyes of all of these, okay, if we get really go into it, it's like fractals and all of that. But the point of this is to simplify it, right? So I'm going to hone it way, 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 way in. But the beautiful thing is like the gift. I think it was Jung that said, the gift of a lifetime is to be who you truly are. And we've been living in a society for hundreds, if not thousands of years that said, no, don't be who you are. Be this, fit into this box, stand in this line, think like this, say this, don't say that, believe this, don't believe that. There's been nothing about authenticity. There's nothing authentic about that. The whole industrial revolution, education, and everything that came out of that was you are a worker. Right? You stay in line. And so, you can pick apart all of the indoctrination and belief systems, and, it gets vast and thick and pretty deep. And what we're doing right now is we're deconstructing all of that, and we're coming back home to who we truly, truly are. So authenticity, I think now more than ever, is so important. And what wraps into authenticity is truth. Now, truth is a tricky word because you could say truth is subjective. You can have many truths because truths are coming from different angles, depending on where you're standing. Like in a partnership, you always have two truths, right? There's not just one truth, there's two truths because there's two angles, there's two perceptions, there's four eyes, right? And then even within that, there's projection, all of these things. So you could say that truth is subjective, but what I'm speaking to is a kind of an essence, an energy, which we could call truth, which is that which is. It's the isness of life that cannot be argued. It just is, right? So we're really getting into the nuance of energy here. And when you kind of combine authenticity with truth, which for me, being authentic is really being in my truth. And being in my truth is checking in with myself. What feels true for me? What feels real for me? What feels authentic for me? Underneath the beliefs and the projections and the triggers and the wounding and the trauma. And that's why all of that work is really important. And I think it can be done faster and faster these days, because we don't need to get stuck in the overanalysis and we don't need to replay the trauma. We actually really need to just get to the feeling, and we need to go straight to the very thing that we've spent our entire life avoiding, which is the pain, right? But when we actually go to challenging emotions, when we actually sit down and feel them, we can move through them actually quite quickly. What takes a long time is our avoidance of them. And that deserves compassion because it's scary. I get it, right? But I think as we're kind of evolving right now, we can move through that process more quickly and get straight to the point. And that is really to go to the source. It's always to go to the source and then give whatever that is love. Again, like love is the alchemist. So true enlightenment is the state of unconditional love, right? So you have this authenticity, truth, and what we're calling enlightenment here, which is this state of being of unconditional love. So what is unconditional love? Because most of us are functioning from a place of conditional love. I love you when, I love you if. When you do this, I love you. When you do that, I don't love you. If you like the same things as me, if you have the same opinions, if you have the same spiritual or religious beliefs or perspectives, if you vote for the same, then I love you, right? All conditional. To love someone even when you have so many differences and you see things totally different. I was in a relationship like this that really taught me unconditional love because we couldn't have been more different. Different generations, different habits of eating, sleeping, entertainment, like belief systems, choices that we're making. I mean, honestly, it couldn't have been more opposite. But we loved each other so much. Like the love saw through all of it, And in the end, it didn't work out for other reasons. But I always believe every relationship has a teaching and a gift. That's my perspective. And I like to look through that lens because then every relationship, it doesn't matter how short or long it's lived or what the journey was like. If you can see that there's a gift and a learning and an evolving that can come through that, then it's never a waste of time. So what that relationship taught me was the true experience of unconditional love. Like I always joked about how, if I had been with this man when I was in my 20s, I wouldn't have even given him the time of day. I would have been like, no, so not interested. So, a lot of what keeps us from unconditional love is judgment. Especially when we think things should be a certain way. Should is always, whenever I hear people use the word should, I think, ooh, this is pointing to some kind of opinion or belief that probably doesn't even belong to them, right? Society says you should. Your parents tell you should. Your teachers tell you should. Your government tells you should. Whose opinion is this and why is that the authority, right? So getting to a place of unconditional love is recognizing, where am I judging people? Where am I judging experience itself? Most importantly, where and how am I judging myself? So one of the questions that the podcast interviewer was asking, I don't remember it word for word, but he was saying something about as we're shifting into higher frequencies, what emotions will we be feeling more of? And, what emotions will we be feeling less of, basically? And the woman replied, and I thought this was, again, just genius. And it resonated so much with what I feel I've really been like on a mission to share, that I feel like is simply being channeled through me. She's like, all of them, but without fear. And she says, and then when you recognize that if you feel all your feelings, all of your emotions without fear, then the ones that we deem as hard, which is what I talked about last week, you'll recognize that you move through them very quickly. The problem that we have right now that creates so much suffering and creates a tremendous amount of judgment is that we are saying that some emotions are good and some emotions are bad. What we're doing is we're denying parts of our humanity. We're judging parts of our humanity. We're exiling parts of our humanity. And what does that do? That fragments us. And if we're fragmented and we don't feel whole, it's really hard to be in a state of enlightenment. Because what enlightenment is and what unconditional love is I love and accept you for all of who you are. Not the conditional with this, when you do that, if this, everything. And so reaching a place of even just self-love can and will only come when we self-accept. And self-accepting means when I accept all parts of me, every nook and cranny of me. Not selectively, oh, I accept this, but I don't accept that. If there's still a part of you that you don't accept, that's where the work needs to be focused on. That's what needs more love and attention. The thing that's going to change us or alchemize us or shift us or evolve us or grow us or whatever you want to call it, improve, develop, whatever it is that you want to use as a term, it's loving that part. It's love. It's just like, it is that simple. We don't need to overanalyze. We don't need to even go into overthinking what is the why and the reason. And it's just, okay, this part hurts or this part is scared. Just be with the emotion. Don't go into the story. Don't overcomplicate things, right? Just be with the sensation. Be with the emotion. Get out of the judgment that this emotion is bad, and so therefore something is wrong and I shouldn't be. I shouldn't be feeling this. Shouldn't be thinking this. Shouldn't be experiencing this. Throw that out the window. There are no shoulds and shouldn'ts. There's only, this is my experience, this is my truth. If I drop into the authenticity of who I am, authenticity isn't being positive and happy and enlightened and zen and Om Mani Padme Hum in every single moment. No. Authenticity is being real and true with who you are and how you feel in your experience in that moment. There's also a sense of self-responsibility, right? If you're like, I'm an asshole and that's my authenticity. No, that's not. Maybe your authenticity in that moment is you've got some underlying anger, and maybe the anger is there because there's underlying sadness, and maybe the sadness is there because there's underlying hurt. And under the hurt, there's a fear, and under the fear, there's a belief, and that belief is affecting your identity. Do you see what I mean? It's never the superficial reaction. It's what the meaning that motivated that reaction. That's what matters. That's what we're getting to. And you could go into, therapy and analysis for 15, 20 years and go through every story and trauma and all of this stuff. And maybe there's a place for that. And maybe, I totally honor and respect that everyone is at a different point in their journey, and how they get there, as I said in the beginning, is going to be completely unique to that person. And the path that they take is the path that they need to take, right? And it may shift according to the phase of your life. And that's perfectly fine. Like, there are no wrong paths, right? But eventually, I think we do get to this point where it's like just oh God, dare I say the fastest route, because there are a lot of people that are like, I don't want to do the work. I just want to get there immediately. And that's not what I mean. But what I mean is the most succinct route is go straight to the core. And when you get straight to the core, whatever that is that might terrify you, that you might feel ashamed of, that you might feel sickened by, that you might feel excruciatingly in pain because of, can you love that too? Can you feel it? Can you accept it? Can you include it? Can you embrace it? Can you love it? So when we think about enlightenment, isn't sitting on the meditation cushion for 30 minutes every single day and, getting to a place where you become the Dalai Lama. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I think meditating every day, for me, it's like a lifeline. And I think it's something that is so beneficial to us for so many reasons. It's good for our nervous system. It's good for keeping everything in harmony and balance. It's like bringing your car to get, a tune up or whatever every single day. Or it's like if you play the guitar, you have to tune the guitar every day, right? So we're just tuning in and harmonizing. If you want to think about chakras, it's aligning chakras. It's clearing so that we can become a vessel for that which wants to move through us. Be it our soul, be it our guides, be it our angels, be it God, be it source, be it universe, be it creator, be it consciousness itself, be it energy, be it light, whatever you want to call it, right? We are the vessel. But the vessel has to be clear in order for things to flow through it easily, smoothly, right? If it's filled with loads of thoughts and stresses and worries and fears and judgments and all of that stuff, the vessel gets crowded. It's like having a cluttered house. So it's not about being empty, you need to be empty and holy and pure and not human and, transcend all that stuff. And, it's not about that. It's about the way that we declutter is by feeling. And when you feel, you get to let go of that. What clutters the house is we don't feel, so we suppress. And not only do we suppress and we're burying things under the carpet and there's a growing heap of dust underneath the carpet, or we throw everything in the closet and it's it's going to burst at any second. It's not just tucking things away. It's building a story and a narrative and, trilogies and, libraries of things that are actually, for the most part, totally untrue. Whereas if we just felt the feeling and we catered and tended to the feeling, tended is a better word, tended to the feeling with love and presence and compassion and acceptance in the first place, we could just let it go. Then we wouldn't have to hold on to it, and we wouldn't have to create a whole story and belief system and identity around it, because that gets really complicated, right? And painful. And again, I think that there's an arc to being human where that is just a part of it. But I do think as we're kind of evolving, maybe that becomes less necessary now. We've played that game, as I've shared. We've played that game. We've got the lesson. We can let it go. And so now I think that it is more quantum where we can get to these places faster. So part of, I think, demystifying and simplifying is actually also about getting out of the logical, over-analytical mind, dropping into the body, dropping into the heart, dropping into the other centers of intelligence, instead of deifying the mind. The mind is an amazing tool, but it is not the master, right? So I think what we're moving into right now is the wisdom of being. And it's not to say that thoughts don't have any relevance, because they actually really do. And one of the things that we have to be mindful of is, what are our thoughts? Not from a place of fear. Ooh, if I think this, I'm going to attract that and something bad's going to happen, because that's just fear. That's just an expression of fear. But actually, just as, what do you ingest in your body as far as your diet? What are the thoughts that you're ingesting? What are the beliefs that you're ingesting? What are the perspectives that you're having? Are they healthy for you? So it's also a time of discernment. What is healthy for me? What feels healthy for me? And when we get more into a state of I'm tuning into, how does this make me feel? If you watch something on social media or on YouTube or news, or you read something and it doesn't make you feel good, don't watch it. And this isn't about spiritual bypassing, sometimes we have to know like what's going on. But if you can feel yourself, like I could feel this past weekend, something happened in the news and I could just feel, wow, this is such a distraction. That was the feeling. It was I could feel how it was so kind of manipulated to grab your attention. And you just search this and read this and it's like, oh, no, it's all a distraction. It's all a distraction. And the more you tune into your body, and this is why having a daily practice of meditation, just tuning in and breathing or moving or dancing or singing is so important, because your body becomes a very fine-tuned compass barometer for the word that came through right now is bullshit. But in essence, it becomes so fine-tuned. Your senses become fine-tuned. Your sight gets heightened. Your smell gets heightened. Your hearing gets heightened. But most importantly, almost, because it's been so dormant, is your intuition gets heightened. Your gut gets heightened. The feeling in your gut, the feeling in your heart, something feels off here. And then you trust it because you've sat with it enough. And you've conversed with it enough. And the thing is a lot of people will be like, well, I had this intuition, or I had, it's a tricky one, because again, I could say, well, maybe it's just very subjective. Like truth is very subjective. But I often find that a lot of the times we can think that something is an intuition, but if it's still coming from a very cerebral place, that if there's any judgment in it, and there's any kind of over analyzing, and maybe even depending on how it affects your behavior, are you acting out of compassion and unconditional love, or are you acting out of fear and judgment? Are you blaming other people? Are you telling them they're wrong and you're right? I wouldn't say that's intuition. And knowing tends to be something that is both very strong and powerful, but also incredibly gentle and loving. A knowing, an intuitive knowing that comes from a higher part of ourselves or source itself, will never incite fear, will never incite judgment, will never incite criticism. So that's why I think the more that we sit in meditation every day and we have these practices and we tune in, what is the language of my unique, authentic being, body, energy, emotions, the language of my emotions? How do I uniquely experience my intuition or psychic abilities? Is it through vision? Is it through hearing? Is it through feeling? There's no one right way, right? But it's getting to know what is my coding almost, right? And then not comparing it to anybody else's. And I think something else that this woman talked about that, this is at the core of my work is, forget what the interviewer was questioning, but it was something about what's the most important thing that humanity needs to know right now? And she said, you're worthy, that you're worthy. And this is part of the unlearning and re-remembering, because we have been taught you're not worthy, you're not good enough as you are, don't be authentic, don't be unique, But the worth, I would say 99.9% of the belief systems that come through with my clients that I work with for the last 15 years is I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy. That's what it boils down to. That's huge, because that is like the basis of our identity, right? If we believe fundamentally I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy, then everything else gets stacked on top of that, and it's all going to be like wobbly because there's no solid foundation. And the truth is, you are worthy. You were born worthy. You will die worthy. Nothing can take that away from you. Nothing. You can forget it. You cannot believe it because you can believe in the story of your hurt or your trauma or your rejection or your abandonment or whatever it is that happened to you, which is part of this human experience or has been. But it doesn't actually mean, and therefore you're not worthy and you've lost your worth. That is just simply not possible. It's like you walking around with two legs and then all of a sudden just one disappears. You know, I know that's kind of a really stupid analogy, because somebody could say, well, you could get into an accident and then it needs to be chopped off. But what I mean is that there are just some things that are intrinsically there and they cannot be taken away. They can't just disappear, right? Maybe the feeling of it can be eroded by a bad situation, but it actually doesn't, we don't ever lose it. We don't ever lose it. So let's come back to the topic. I like to make things very simple. So I think when you are sitting with yourself, what I like to cue people into is just feel your body. How does your body feel right now? Breathe into your body. Does it feel tense or does it feel relaxed? Where there's tension, breathe into it. Can you allow it to soften? Don't try and change it, but just softening into the experience. Oh, I have tension in my stomach. Okay, don't try and change it. Don't judge it as being good or bad or right or wrong or why is it there and why I want to change it. No, just be with like, oh, this is tension in my belly. Okay, how can I just be present with it? How can I just sit into it, with it? And by doing that, it naturally it relaxes, because I think everything and everyone fundamentally wants to be seen, heard, and understood. We want to be witnessed. And the moment we witness something within ourselves, whether it's emotional, physical, psychological, energetic, spiritual, that part gets to relax because it's been seen and it's been felt. Maybe it's even been understood, right? So coming into the body, feeling the sensations, feeling the emotions within those sensations, but holding it all and staying with it all, no matter what comes out of it, but not getting distracted by going into the story, just staying with the sensation, staying with the emotion, and being that container of love that you've heard me talk about so much. Being the unconditional, unconditional love, which is a state of being, which is really just about, can whatever I'm feeling, thinking, or experiencing right now be okay? Can I just be with it? Now, if we want to go into deeper levels of this is funny. This has been a theme that's come up from kind of different angles. So I want to talk about it. It's coming into the void. So the void is this paradox of, it feels like nothingness. It feels like non-existence, which for the ego is terrifying, because the ego is most afraid of not existing, right? So a lot of the times when people have certain fears that come up, certain beliefs, a big theme that comes up is, I'm alone. I'm alone, I'm separate. I will be alone forever. And the fear of being alone is the fear of, there's many things, but when we get down to the core of it, it's either of non-existence or of nothingness. And it really is about tapping into the void. And the paradox and the irony of the void is, it feels like nothing, and yet it is the source of everything. That out of nothingness comes everything. Out of the void comes all of creation. So when you can lean into that part, and this is like true mastery, when you can lean into that part and sit with it in peace, that might be one of the greatest states of enlightenment, because what we recognize in the emptiness, in the being comfortable with the discomfort and softening and softening and softening and softening and softening and letting go and letting go and letting go and surrendering and surrendering and surrendering and becoming that pure vessel, is that out of the nothingness is when we feel that beautiful state of bliss and unconditional love. And I think that's when the light turns on in the darkness. And there's your moment of enlightenment. But I think it can only come through the acceptance of all that is. Because the void just creates everything, but doesn't go, oh no, that creation is good and that's bad. And that's it just is. We've come back to the isness. The ultimate truth is the isness. Without the judgment, without the labeling, without the duality. And there's a purpose for duality in this realm. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But getting out of the judgment. So the simplest path to me is just being able to learn and to kind of, like, if you think of us as habitual creatures that have just literally been trained to think and believe and therefore behave in certain ways by repetition, we can train ourselves in a totally different way. Yes, does it require changing our thoughts and our beliefs and our choices through our behavior? Yes. Okay, we have to change all of that stuff. But I think that the simplest path for me is, can you just have a practice where every day, and I like to do it first thing in the morning, I just sit up in bed. I don't do anything else. I just sit up and I begin then and there immediately before my feet even touch the ground. And just sit with yourself and just feel. I think we are giving ourselves the permission to finally feel after generations, decades upon decades of you're not allowed to feel this, Or if you're intuitive, you're going to be stoned or you're going to be put in the fire. Or if you say this, then you're going to be stoned to death. Because we've been through just so much history of judgment and therefore fear and therefore survival. And I think we're coming out of that. We don't need to survive anymore. We can actually thrive. And so what would life be if we didn't have to be so afraid? And something else, I think it was this woman. I don't know. Sometimes I pick things up and I don't know. I don't remember where it comes from. But that anxiety is just a repression of underlying emotions that haven't been felt. And what I would add to that is not just felt, but witnessed, heard, understood, listened to. As I said last week, I think one of the most powerful practices we can have is just being in conversation with ourselves every single day. How am I feeling? What's coming up for me? Okay, where is this coming from? What does this part of me need? How can I give that to myself? How can I just be with myself? How can I love all of this? It's a conversation. It's an ongoing conversation. That's all it is, right? And so when we can do this every day, where we're just sitting and simply being and checking in with ourselves and feeling and having the conversation and tuning in, for me, when, it's been many, many months where I've had this daily dedication, it's just come really natural. I haven't forced it at all. It's almost like I can't not do it. I feel lighter. I feel every time it becomes more expansive. And actually what's really beautiful is a lot of people have this kind of idea that when you get into these higher states and higher frequencies that you get like a cloud and you kind of float up. And that is true to a certain degree. I've certainly felt that, where it's like, ooh, you feel like this expansive, euphoric, you don't feel your body anymore. And that's beautiful. But what I've really been feeling in my practice lately is actually, and I think I share this about the angel that I felt sat in me. is this like weight in my body. I felt it again this morning, and it's this presence. And I was specifically tuning into the masculine, like the divine masculine in me. And this is another podcast that I'd like to talk about women having to be far too in their kind of strained masculine, and they're losing their femininity and all of these things. But when I really felt the divine masculine land in me, and I was so embodied, and I could really feel the weight in my body. It was like, that's safety. That's groundedness. That's me feeling protected. So that then the feminine can go play, right? So this might seem like a tangent, but why I'm sharing this is that I can see what is coming through and literally landing in me, because every day I'm making space to be with this vessel and to clear anything that needs to be cleared by feeling it, or just simply being in a clear vessel and then allowing what needs to come into it to come into it. And sometimes it's incredible. It's really profound and magical. And sometimes it's just blissful and peaceful. At the very least, it's peaceful. And then I think the more moments of peace we have, and the less noise and static, and especially the less amount of judgment and all that stuff. And that still comes in. I'm human. I'm human. It still comes in, but I can recognize it more, and I can be with it, and I can shift it more easily. But it still comes in, y'all. I'm still superhuman. Not superhuman, but you know what I mean? I'm still very human. I still get pissed off at things, but I don't judge myself for it anymore. But I'm learning just like, okay, take responsibility for that. Hold that. Come back to a place of love. Don't be so hard on yourself. But that there's this, I've lost my train of thought now. You know, this is getting long, so I'm going to come to the end. But just that there is, there's just this sinking in, and therefore this kind of, so that's what I was going to say. When you come into a greater sense of peace, I think that's when we can tap more into that natural, inherent, intrinsic state of being, which is us, which is unconditional love. But we got to sift through all the noise and the distraction and the static and the clutter and the junk, because there's a hell of a lot that is purposefully there to take you away from this state. Because you know why? Because this state is so unbelievably powerful. And we're remembering how powerful we are. We're awakening all of our dormant abilities. We're all psychic. We all have these different abilities that we think are kind of like magical, or only a certain chosen few have. No, we all have it. They're just asleep, right? So we're awakening, and awakening is just remembering. So just the simplest thing, again, the invitation is, try to make space where every day you sit with yourself and you feel. This is the doorway. You feel that which you have not wanted to feel. You don't indulge in the story and the narrative and the beliefs and the identities that go with that. You just feel. You be in the vulnerability of feeling. And even if it's uncomfortable, you stay with it, and you find comfort in the discomfort, and you soften, and maybe you even reach the void. God knows what journey you're going to go on, but hold yourself in it and through it, and just feel, how can I love this? How is all of this okay? How is this all just perfect as it is? And may I just love it. And the more you practice that, the less judgmental of your experience you will be, the more peace you will find, and the easier it is to go into that state of unconditional love, because it will feel like home. It will feel like the sweetest, most wonderful thing. And it doesn't mean you're not going to still have hard days or hard times or hard situations, but love will be the backdrop. Love will be the container. And you'll move through it very, very differently, because you will feel supported. You will feel held. You will not feel as alone as you thought you were. And that's a beautiful thing. So there's the invitation. As always, take it or leave it as feels right for you, and loving you from afar. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.